workshop session on creating conditions for children to thrive through expanded learning. We will then offer a break/transition time to allow folks time to transition to our regional breakouts, where our participants can engage with our system of support for expanded learning in their specific regional teams. And you'll have about 45 minutes to engage in dialogue and network and connect and community build. And then our Zoom will end at 12 p.m. on the dot. We will provide warning messages to everyone, so that way we don't cut off any conversations that you might be having. Before we open it up to our presenters, if you are engaging in social media, we just ask that you use our hashtag California ELO program. And again, we end this week with today's Day 2 workshop. Next week on Tuesday, September 26th, we will be offering our Fall Academy on supporting early learners in expanded learning. And that will be from 10 a.m. to 12 p.m. And then our last session will be supporting LEA leaders on Wednesday, September 27th from 10 a.m. to 12 p.m. There's still time to register, so we'll drop that link in the chat if you are interested in those 2 sessions. And also we will be opening ELO-P fall office hours beginning October through December 2023. So we'll also drop in this chat if folks are interested in joining us for fall ELO-P office hours, or you can scan the QR code and register here. And lastly, if you would like to join the CAN listserv, you can, we'll drop another link in the chat on how to join our CAN listserv, where you stay connected with all of the latest and greatest news supporting young people in our programs. You can also explore our latest resources and also contact the System of Support for Expanded Learning. All right, and so without further ado, we are going to be spotlighting in a few moments. Actually, before I do that, I am going to invite Tiffany Gibson from the California After School Network to start us off before we jump into our session with a few wise words.
Thank you, Melissa. Good morning, everybody. I am Tiffany Gibson. I'm the director of the Equity and Quality team for the California After School Network. So welcome again, Nat. That was incredible. And I just wanted to say it out loud so that everyone could hear me in the cheap seats. I'm going to say a little bit, and it's really just about reminding folks, these ELO-P convenings are really to help us navigate one of the most flexible funding streams that expanded learning has ever really had. But to do that, we feel like there's a mental model that needs to shift, and a little openness that we think people need to kind of hold as they do that. And so there's something that we started to put, and we're still kind of, wordsmithing it and fine tuning it, but we believe it's a good way for people to understand how we think expanded learning is, and a way to hold as you really think about how you want to do the work of building out these programs in your spaces. So we call it our pedagogical methodology, and basically it's just the structure and the framing of how we see and what we consider important about the work. Every child, youth, and the adults that live, love, and work with them deserve just and affirming spaces and opportunities that enrich, empower, enlighten, educate, and elevate them. Learning happens in every context, and young people are assets in supporting their own learning and creating solutions to the issues and the challenges that they face. Expanded learning in all out-of-school time spaces can be cultivated by anchoring in some core beliefs and shared mindsets. We are rooted in love, and love is shown in our actions and our words. We are asset anchored and driven. We are aspirational in our mindsets, our words, and our actions. We are connected by our differences, because that is what gives us strength and creates our collective. The appreciation of every cultural, linguistic, and lived experience is what we leverage to grow our collective spaces. We make decisions based on elevating the intrinsic gifts, talents, and wisdom of those closest to the problems we work collaboratively to solve. And we learn by doing, and we grow by reflecting on that learning. Y'all, welcome to day 2. And now I'm going to pass it back to Melissa so we can introduce our wonderful panel of folks.
Thank you, Tiff. I could hear that over and over. So thank you for sharing that with all of us. All right, we're going to introduce our guest speakers and presenters and all of the above today. So welcoming Jen Taylor from the California Department of Ed, Jeff Davis from the California After School Network, Brett Stevens from Kids Included Together, Robert Illingworth from Woodcraft Rangers, and Mary Reed from the Sacramento County Office of Education. Thank you. And I'll stop sharing so Jeff, you can get to sharing slides.
Thank you, Melissa. Hi, everybody. So good to see everyone. So many names and faces we've seen at office hours and different events. So it's exciting to see you all. And I just want to put out too for the system of support for expanded learning, our system, and I know we're going to drop in the link for the contacts. If you could all rename yourselves too with SSCL in your name, just to show that, you know, we have a whole system here to support everyone as well. So thank you. We're really excited today to have this amazing panel, you know, around creating conditions for children and youth to thrive and expand learning. And, you know, just to kind of get us started, I'll kick off our introductions, and then we'll pass it to everyone to introduce themselves and what they do and where they work and what they're passionate about. And so I'm Jen Taylor. I'm with the Expanded Learning Division at the California Department of Education. I work with Region 3, which is the Sacramento area up here in Northern California, around Sacramento County and the 9 surrounding counties. So I support programs as well as the system of support for expanded learning. And I am also on here to represent the view as a parent of a student with disabilities. My youngest child, my son, is autistic and receives special education services. So I am part of a special education local plan area community advisory committee as a parent member. So, and I'll go ahead and I'll kick it to Jeff.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Jeff Davis with the California After School Network. One thing I'm passionate about is creating conditions for children and youth to thrive, rooted in love. We say love is a research-based approach. And I'll pass it to the screen underneath me, Brett Stevens.
My name is Brett Stevens. I work with Kids Included Together. So we are a nonprofit that works with organizations and providers all across the country and even internationally to help them develop and sustain inclusive programs. I am the evaluation specialist, which means I get to work directly with programs, dive into their research and the data, and really help them come up with inclusive policies and practices that they can put in place. And I would say that I am really passionate just about increasing the confidence level of those providers so that they can kind of walk into the program and really take heads on these ideas of inclusivity. And I will pass it down to Robert beneath me.
Great. Hello, everybody. Hello. So my name is Robert Illingworth. I am the Director of Inclusion for Woodcraft Rangers. We are an after-school program, and we provide enrichment at about 170 different school sites throughout the area of the greater Los Angeles. I have the pleasure of, really getting, spearheading and just getting this inclusion department going with Woodcraft Rangers. So I'm very excited for that opportunity. This is a topic that's very near and dear to me as I do have a family member who's on the spectrum, and just excited to, be making the changes that we're going to be making, and the future definitely looks a lot brighter. So thank you very much for having me here.
think that leaves me to introduce myself. Hi, everyone. My name is Mary Reed. I'm the coordinator for social and emotional learning up here in Sacramento at our County Office of Education. So I work with our local districts throughout Sacramento as well as statewide to kind of similar to everyone else, really just create conditions where our youth and our adults, our staff and our educators can thrive and feel seen and valued, included and accepted just for who they are and who they bring into our communities. So I'm really excited in particular about professional learning and helping adults really do some of their own adult social emotional learning so we can bring our best selves into each space with our colleagues and with the youth that we support and the families as well. So thanks for having me.
Thank you, everyone. We're excited to have all this, these variety of perspectives as we kind of approach this work, and noticing too that we all have a role in that, right? As as supports in the space, how we show up also impacts how we support students. So we're really excited to kind of kick off this conversation, but we're going to do a little bit of, I think, context setting too today. So first, we're going to talk a little bit about the foundations of expanded learning in positive youth development, really making that connection to the science of learning and development. And then we'll talk about kind of different perspectives and supports from our panel here. So then we'll get into different resources and regional breakouts for today. But I'll pass it to Jeff to provide a little bit of history with the connection to expanded learning and inclusion.
Thank you, Jen. I think that a lot of us are feeling the sort of the weight of what I'm calling California's second big expansion of expanded learning programs. That first one happened in 2006 with the implementation of the After-School Education and Safety Program. And that was released that was implemented just after the release of Bonnie Bernard's seminal text, Resiliency, What We Have Learned. And in fact, a lot of what was outlined in that text ended up being foundational to our quality standards. And let's take a look at what Bonnie Bernard really was able to outline in that text, which is that when children and youth experience protective factors, you see there on the left, the conditions, right? The environmental conditions of caring relationships, high expectations, and opportunities for meaningful participation that met their developmental needs and promoted strengths that ended up in success in school and in life. This was a sort of summary of all of the research of what we knew about human development at the time. And recently, the Science of Learning and Development and the Aspen Commission on Social, Emotional, and Academic Development sort of did another lit review incorporating neuroscience and some of the newer science of what we knew about human development. And we can sort of look at that framework on slide 8, or slide 7, sorry. And that framework tells us really very similar things as to what Bonnie Bernard's framework really said, that it's really about the conditions of the learning environment and the experience that children and youth are having. And I think that what you can see in there is caring relationships, high expectations, and opportunities for meaningful participation are all embedded in there. What I really love is that this one outlines safe, relationship-based, and equitable learning environments as being important conditions. These are very similar to, like I said, Bonnie Bernard's principles, which are the foundation of our quality standards. You can see our point of service standards in there on slide 8. that this is all about, you can see those 6 point of service quality standards, all about creating those similar conditions, right, that were described that result in long-term success in school and in life. I think it's important to note, though, that the programmatic standards really say that this doesn't happen by accident. The standards are framed as standards in action because these are verbs. These are things that people do to create these types of conditions, and oftentimes those conditions are set through the implementation of those programmatic standards. So, in summary, right, mapping to the quality standards and continuous quality improvement, that creates the conditions that are consistent with creating positive developmental outcomes. So if we go to the next slide, what we like to say, and go to the next slide, what we like to say is that why we go to work each and every day is for all of the above. We do that for whole children, for the entire child and everything that they are, whether that be academically, socially, and how they interact and how they cope with the challenges that are in front of them. Next slide, please. Furthermore, this is something that we know that we can't do alone. The National Aspen Commission also outlined that we need to align all of our research sources and community partners in order to support those whole children. Noting that this is really consistent with our current vision in California for transforming schools. So if we could take a look at that vision, expanded learning is one of multiple investments that California is making to support these whole children. Now, today's next slide, please. Today's workshop is going to sort of ground in creating those conditions for all children to thrive. But I thought that it was relevant to read the point of service quality standard around diversity, access, and equity. That it creates an environment in which students experience values that embrace diversity and equity regardless of race, color, religion, sex, age, income level, national origin, physical ability, sexual orientation, and/or gender identity and expression. I want to acknowledge that this workshop is going to focus on inclusion, but that there could be probably 20 workshops that could spring just from that one quality standard alone, and surfacing one definition of inclusion that I was able to locate from the American Psychological Association, and that is on the next slide, which is very consistent with that quality standard of diversity, access, and equity, as you can see. We'll have some resources that we can point you to at the end, but at this time, I'd like to conclude that context setting and learn from the wisdom of our great panel. And I want to turn to you, Brett, from Kids Included Together. You support multiple organizations throughout the country in terms of a focus on inclusion. And as you know, we're speaking to a group of expanded learning leaders here in California, and just wondering what insights that you can share that Kids Included Together has gained through its experience supporting multiple types of providers and organizations to develop inclusive programs.
Yeah, thanks, Jeff. I think KIT has been in this field doing this work for about 25 years. And I think one of the really important things to remember is that what was considered inclusive 25 years ago looks vastly different than what we would consider an inclusive program today. And so it's important to remember that that idea of inclusion is ever evolving. I'm someone who really likes a checklist and a goal, and I want to be able to like check things off, and inclusion just doesn't work that way. So even as a program, looking at what policies, what procedures can we set up, it's not as simple as just kind of like having that checklist and going for it. It really is something that's ever evolving, something that as program leaders and staff, we really have to constantly be reflecting and thinking about is this the right choices for this individual student and their unique needs? So a couple of the things that I would really point out that are important to do is that one of the benefits of having that mind switch, that this is an evolving process, is it takes some of that pressure off. I always tell people to start small, start with, one student that you're working with, and what can we do to make this experience better for them. You don't have to dive right in and think I've got to change every single thing about my program and every little thing, and my staff needs all of this training. Start small. Meet people where they are at. At KIT, one of our main goals is really to surround that provider with support. And another thing that we have found over the years is that that's not going to happen in a single training. So this isn't something where you can kind of do a one-day training and everyone's going to leave and be able to, go back into the setting and put all these things into place. It really needs to be something that as leaders, you've kind of thought through and organized about how you're going to provide that ongoing training to give people the knowledge, the tools, the support that they need. We've found that most people really want to do the right thing. We don't have a lot of people coming to us these days who are like, no, absolutely not. I don't want, this group of students in. Most people want to do the right thing. They just don't know how, or they don't have the tools or support that they need. So really finding ways to give those providers, those people that are on the ground doing that hard work, giving them that support that they need. And sometimes that is just them calling into the call center here at KIT and having somebody on the other end who can emphasize with them, right? Yeah, this is hard. It is a hard thing to do when you are, having a student who has behaviors, or you're having a student who you really have to rethink your entire, program for. It's a hard thing to do. So sometimes it's a matter of just being that listening ear for them. The other thing that we have seen from our data when we ask providers and organizations, what is the barrier to including students, and also what are some facilitators to including students, we get the same answer, and that is families. So I think that it's really important that when you're thinking about making an inclusive program and developing that program and those policies and the procedures that you're going to be putting in place, is thinking about how can you engage families in that development process. And that even goes for students. I can think of a time when I was teaching and I had a student who was, exhibiting a lot of behaviors. And so I kind of came in and I had developed a beautiful poster with all of the things that they could do to calm themselves down. I made the calm down corner for them, and it was a disaster, right? The poster was ripped up. The calm down corner was a mess. And after a couple of weeks, I went to the student and I'm like, I just don't know what else to do. We've tried all of these things. And he's like, I don't like any of those things. And it kind of hit me that I had never asked him, what is it that calms you down? What would you like to try? And that mindset switch of just involving the student, letting him make the poster, letting him pick out things for the Calm Down Center made a huge difference. And I think that sometimes we are problem solvers and we go into a situation and we want to solve all of the problems with all of these ideas that we come up with. And we forget that the people on the other end are really active participants, right? We need to involve those families. We need to involve the children as well in coming up with these solutions and coming up with ways that they can feel safe and supported in the environment, as well as those people that are on the ground, those providers, involving them and what is it that you need in that classroom. And so really bringing everybody to the table. As part of my role is working on those policies and procedures. Having all of those different voices at the table is extremely important. And then the other thing is, in those policies and procedures, it's not a one size fits all situation, right? So you have an incident with one student, it's not going to necessarily have the same result, 3 weeks down the road. So when we're looking at those policies and procedures, putting into place not necessarily that checklist of if they do X, Y, and Z, we're going to kick them out of the program, right? That's not what we want. We want to have a policy where everybody knows that, okay, we're going to come to the table. We're going to fill out, this form. We're going to look at the environment. We're going to look at, the providers. We're going to look at, the activities that they like. So really setting those procedures up to be that team discussion. So people know what to do when they get into those situations, and supporting, all of those different parties that need to come to the table.
Thank you, Brett. I love the youth voice and leadership that you brought into this space, just recognizing that quality standard there with the co-creation of working with the student and also, collaborating with families. So appreciate you sharing that. I'm gonna ask Mary now, what can we learn from your work supporting LEAs and organizations with promoting social emotional learning and inclusion practices? And what are some common things that you would want all LEAs and agencies to know and understand and implement?
That's a tough act to follow. I really loved everything you said, Brett. Thanks for sharing. And I think I'll just kind of add on and build that when we're thinking about these skills and conditions in order for students to thrive, as well as for us as adults to thrive. And I think the biggest, most important point that I find myself making often is that social and emotional learning is not a curriculum. Oftentimes we think that if we take the binder and then we open it up and it's a turnkey resource and we've got day 1, lesson 1, day 2, lesson 2, and we set aside those 20 minutes of our day to do that lesson, and then we can check our box and say that we've done social emotional learning. That's not to devalue curriculum. There is value in really explicitly teaching our students the skills that they might need in order to navigate difficult situations, to have healthy relationships, to regulate their emotions. There's definitely a value in that. What I think the most important thing for us to understand as the adults within those systems is that we have to go deeper, we have to expand. We have to look at our own practices, the systems that we work within, and all of those things to really make social and emotional learning a part of our culture at the systemic level, at the site level, and then at the classroom level, and then even at that down to that individual level where it's between us as providers with the youth we work with, or within our colleagues as well. So understanding that our own adult SEL is really important. So that goes for us maybe who might be working in an office setting and really working at more of a supervisory level. And that goes for folks who are in the classrooms on our school sites and with our youth. We have to really do our own learning around those core competencies of social emotional learning. So our self-awareness and our self-management. So we have to be able to bring our best self to our program with our youth, with our colleagues as well. Really doing that work around, knowing what our stress triggers are, what gets us upset, how we might respond, how we can regulate. Getting to build our awareness of others and our relationship skills, our problem solving, our communication, where our strengths are and where our opportunities for growth are. And really bringing that into everything that we do, whether that be how we communicate with our colleagues, or how we approach a student who might be having some challenges or needing some extra support. So the more we work on that and the more we model that for our kids, that, ooh, I messed up, I made a mistake, I'm still learning, I'm having a hard day, here's some things I'm going to do to help myself. So really just bringing that awareness to the idea that social emotional learning is not just for our students, and it's not just a curriculum. It's really more of a part of how we're bringing it to the broader context. And I think the way we started today with that mindfulness moment and just bringing our attention to that is a perfect example of social and emotional learning becoming just a part of how we do things and how we approach our work, and honoring that it's just as important for us as adults as it is for the youth and the families that we work with and support. We need to make that a part of all of the pieces. I was at a conference recently where they talked about bringing social and emotional learning into their board meeting. So they started their board meeting with looking at a mood meter and and having everybody think about where they might have fallen on that mood meter, And like Nat said, when we started out today, they said, this is an invitation. So making that invitation available for everybody, I thought was that's a beautiful example of how to do that. I think bringing kind of the equity and inclusion piece in with social emotional learning is just vital. At SCOE, I work very closely with our equity, inclusion, and social justice coordinator here, and we really honor the idea that we can't have conversations about equity and inclusion without having our own adult SEL skills, right? And being able to be uncomfortable and maybe having some harder conversations and self-reflecting and looking at our own identities and our own biases and our own approaches, and how might we be able to shift those, and really having that be a piece of that, as well as just really focusing in on these ideas of identity and belonging. And I think that when it comes to inclusion practices, we have to kind of be able to have a balance between that self-reflection and that self-awareness and our social awareness. So really building our awareness of the identities we hold and bring into a space, and honoring and acknowledging and affirming the identities that our students hold and bring into a space, and creating an environment at that tier 1 level. So it's at that whole system, whether it be the district system, the school system, or your classroom system, whatever level that you're at, and really looking at how are we making this for everyone, right? When we make practices and environments where everyone is seen and valued, that not only benefits maybe some of our students who struggle, or some of our students who maybe haven't always been included, it benefits everyone, including us as the adults. And then creating those cultures of belonging. We talked a little bit about some of the brain research and the science behind this. It's really quite clear, right? When we think back to our ancestors, that need for belonging and being a part of something and part of a group was a survival mechanism, right? Back when there were risks and things going on, like saber-toothed tigers and things like that. So we needed to belong. We needed to be in a group so that we would have protection, so that we would have folks to have our back, so we would have our needs met for survival. And that has evolved with us in different ways over time. And it's still a crucial piece of our students as well as us as adults being able to thrive. So if we feel like we've got a place where we fit in, or I'm sorry, I'm glad I caught myself on that one, a place where we belong. And one of my favorite pieces when we do these trainings about belonging is that belonging is not fitting in. So it's a place where we belong and we're accepted as we are. We don't have to fit in order to belong. When we have a community of belonging, I am just as I am, with all my quirks, with all my faults, with all my strengths, and what I bring to the table. I belong. I don't fit in. I am not asked to change or alter any piece of who I am and my core identities in order to be a part of that community. And I think it ties really nicely in with kind of this idea of restorative practices that I think really helps us set that tone of building a community and building and being a part of something that we all feel connected to, we all strive to uphold. We really all want to lift our community up, and we don't want to cause harm to it. And when we set up conditions through social emotional learning, through restorative practices and community building, where all of our students and all of our adults have that feeling of belonging and have that feeling of being a part of that, the more we set those conditions up, the less folks want to cause harm to that community. The more we want to lift it up, and we don't want to cause harm to it. Us being humans, we're going to have times where we cause harm. We're going to have times where either advertently or inadvertently, on purpose or accidentally, harm is caused and there's impact. And so we give our students and we give our adults, our systems give that opportunity to repair that and rebuild it. And the more we've built it up, the more folks want to do that repair. Whereas if we don't have that sense where that student doesn't feel connected or that colleague doesn't feel valued, there's going to be less motivation to repair it. So really doing that work, I think one of the most important pieces of social emotional learning and anything related to it is prevention, and really doing that work at the upfront to really set those conditions for thriving. When we think about kids who are having behavior challenges, I know that's something I'm seeing a lot of requests for. I do a training on de-escalation and working with folks who are in crisis and in stress. We're seeing a lot more of that lately. And the biggest piece when I do that training that I spend and invest a lot of time on is that prevention piece, because I can teach some tools and tricks and strategies for how to approach somebody who's escalated and somebody who's upset, to get them de-escalated, to get them regulated and calm them down. And there certainly is going to be space for that skill set. And the more we can invest in setting up success and preventing crisis and preventing stress by having structures and routines, by creating communities of belonging, by practicing skills for emotion identification and regulation and problem solving and communication, and really setting us up for success with that, the less we're going to need those skills of de-escalation, because we've prevented a lot of our escalations from happening. So the ones that do happen, we as the adults in the system, we have the energy and we have the time to devote to really helping with those skill sets for those higher level needs, because we've invested that time in preventing things from happening by building communities and teaching skills to kind of prevent that from happening. So just one last kind of offering as to a starting spot for some really practical ways to bring social and emotional learning into our programs and into our classrooms are the 3 signature practices of social emotional learning. So these are really a part of that kind of prevention piece and a part of that kind of community and culture building piece for social emotional learning. We can use them with adults, we can use them with youth, we can use them with families even. So those 3 signature practices are always starting with a welcoming and inclusion ritual. And it's a way to have a predictable way to start our time together, whether it be a 1-hour meeting, an all-day professional learning, or your after-school program. And we're welcoming everyone into the space. We're making space for everyone to be as they are. Maybe it's a self-reflection piece, kind of like we did today. Maybe it's an opportunity to connect and share something about yourself and build those relationships. Maybe it's a little skill we're going to practice for ourselves, but we always start out with that. And then throughout the day, really having the second signature practice, which is engaging activities embedded throughout. And that is going to be where we really can focus on inclusion and really be intentional with maybe helping students pair up together across differences. Maybe we can have opportunities for different learning styles. So if somebody wants to draw and somebody wants to talk and somebody wants to write and somebody else wants to sing, you know, we have different opportunities around engagement that offers student choice and different learners types to be honored and held space for. And then ending with that optimistic or intentional closure, where we're really thinking about what we experienced today, doing some reflection, thinking about what we may have learned or what might be coming next, and just having that opportunity to kind of celebrate that time together and think forward of what's coming next. So I'm going to go ahead and put a link in the chat, and this is on the slides as well, but just it's a 3 signature practices playbook. It has a ton of resources online that you can find from Castle, and it's a good starting spot, and it has some really concrete things you could take and use, you know, tomorrow if you wanted to. So I'll wrap it up. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mary. Thank you for, really elevating that our awareness, like our awareness of how we show up in this space is so critical, and just supporting youth. And feel free, those, drop in the chat, maybe strategies on how you manage that, right? How you take care of yourself. This is a learning space, so just want to put that out there to feel free to drop in the chat. And we'll move to Robert. Robert, you're working with a community-based organization, supporting multiple sites. What are common ways sites need support for inclusion? And what are the kinds of things you hope site coordinators and point of service staff should know, understand, and implement?
Yeah, so again, just to reiterate, first of all, just thank you for having me, and giving me the opportunity to participate in this awesome discussion. As an individual with a family member diagnosed with autism, I've experienced the judgmental stares, right? The stigma faced daily, by students and families that we serve. So, and also someone who's worked in various service and support roles over the years, I'm extremely excited for the change occurring in our field. The future is definitely looking brighter, like I mentioned earlier. So I feel like we're taking huge steps toward a more inclusive society, for the years to come. So that being said, supporting inclusion in a community-based organization definitely requires, a commitment to continuous learning, to flexibility and person-centered approach. Site coordinators and staff definitely play, a crucial role as they're the individuals that are working directly with the students, right? Myself as a director, I can lay the plan out, but they're the stars of the show. They're the ones that are doing the important work. So I always tell my staff, yes, I'm the director, but you guys are the ones doing the fun work. You guys are the ones doing the meaningful work. I do the planning, and you guys actually get to make the changes. So just making sure first and foremost that our staff knows, how integral their role is, and not really see themselves like as the middleman, right, or as below management. Because in my opinion, our agency, would not be successful if it wasn't for the work that they do and the quality of work that they provide. So. However, Woodcraft Rangers, right, we've been around for 101 years. We've always been inclusive with our approach in general. But going into our second century of serving Los Angeles youth, we're excited, right, for our first of its kind large scale inclusion initiative. We're taking a more intentional approach to inclusion for intellectual and developmental population. So with that, right, Woodcraft Rangers, we believe that ongoing trainings, on understanding the specific needs and challenges for individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities are crucial to inclusion. We need to be constantly learning new practices, research-based. I love that. Jeff mentioned that love is a research-based practice, and I definitely agree with that. We have to start all of our approaches with love, so I definitely agree with that. Site coordinators and staff should definitely have a strong understanding of intellectual disabilities, including the different types and the characteristics, that present with those types of developmental disabilities, in order to adjust our approach, right? They should be aware of the key principles of inclusive education, so the individual needs to be present, participating, supported, and as well need to be achieving goals. So to me, those are the most important things when it comes to actually providing an inclusive environment for individuals to thrive. At Woodcraft Rangers, we're implementing regular training sessions for all of our staff members on working effectively with this population. Woodcraft Rangers have always been student-led, so that's one of the most important things, and I know that Mary touched on that as well, is just making sure that we're talking to our kiddos about what it is that they want to do. If either of any of us here were placed in a situation, in which we had to do something that we didn't want to do, and we had no way of, making a choice, or we weren't given another option, we'd probably be pretty upset as well. So, just making sure that we're allowing our children to communicate to us what they're interested in, because first and foremost, right, if they're not interested, they're not going to be engaged, and engagement is huge. So we want to make sure that we're giving our kiddos an opportunity to express themselves, express their interests, and we want to make sure that we find a way to really just work on shining a light on those interests and building those strengths. So as far as individuality, like I mentioned, we've been student-led. We really take an approach here where if the kiddo's having a bad day and they don't want to participate in a certain program that's being run that day, we want to give that opportunity to that kiddo to be able to communicate to us that maybe they just want to have a day where they take it easy, and reinforce the communication there. as opposed to waiting until, the student displays a maladaptive behavior or something to get out of participating in an activity that maybe they're just not feeling that day. We'd rather reinforce the communication and then letting us know how they're feeling and listen to them, give them a voice. They're children, but they're also human beings. And, we think back to when we were kids, I'm pretty sure we're pretty in tune with how we felt about certain situations, but maybe, right, maybe there were situations for ourselves, right, where we weren't able to express that we were uncomfortable in a certain situation. So just really taking that into consideration, especially when we're talking about a population that, has a lot of difficulty with regulating emotions. So we want to just make sure that we're giving these kids an opportunity to communicate what they're feeling and really listen to what it is that they're asking for it. So, when it comes to individualization, right, we want to make sure that our site coordinators are skilled in implementing individualized support plans. That could be something as simple as if the child asks for a break, giving that child a break. If that's going to avoid, right, the student having a negative mindset on our program, I'd rather have the student take a 5 or 10 minute break or even just take an easy day than not want to come back to the program because they're going to be forced to do something that they just don't find fun. And we can then look into our staffing and say, okay, well, if the student is into this, let's see if we have someone in our pool that we can then bring to that site to provide that opportunity for that kiddo to do what they're interested in. So, with communication, I think that that's one aspect that can be definitely challenging, not just with regards to individuals with alternate means of communication, or individuals that utilize, an AAC device, but also for individuals that speak different languages. With our programs, we're at about 170 different school sites, and we need to make sure that we are keeping in mind that not just individuals with different levels of skills and ability to communicate are being addressed, but also those individuals that might speak a different language. So making sure that we have staff at those sites to continue to provide not just the kiddos but those families a voice, right, and being able to advocate for their son or daughter in a way that doesn't present any barriers due to language. So, it's not just the kiddos, it's the families. I know that was mentioned before too, right? Families sometimes can be difficult to work with, but also they know the kiddos best, and so we need to be mindful, right, that they're in the homes with those kids and we have them for a certain portion of the day. So we get to witness some of the behavior, but there might be different layers, right, that are being presented at home that we're not aware of. And so really just talking to those parents about what strategies they're trying to utilize at home for addressing those behaviors. And if those are working for them at home, we can also try to implement those at program. But if they're not, and we seem to find an approach that's working at program, then we can, teach that to the parent and then have them generalize those skill sets the kids are displaying at the programs, take those skills home, right, and generalize that skill set. One of the most important things, and I know that something that's been mentioned, is behavior, right? We're trying to step away from correcting behavior and the behavior being a bad behavior versus like, you need to behave in order to be a part of this program and whatnot, right? So I think really just stepping from this notion of students need to behave and just going more like someone else mentioned, from behaving to belonging. I feel like that in itself just has a huge power on these kiddos. It's like, you're not broken. We're not trying to fix you. You are who you are, and we're going to help you shine in whatever light that is. So for me, it really comes down to reframing behavior as a communication. Ultimately, all of us communicate through behaviors. The first way we learned to communicate with the world was through crying as a newborn, right? Newborns are not able to point or talk or get up and walk to the fridge if they're hungry or thirsty. They cry. And it's up to the parent to try to figure out what that cry means, right? It's a guessing game for those first couple of months. Your baby's crying, you're not really sure why. You try the different things, and eventually you understand. And as a parent, it's your job to teach that baby other ways to communicate those needs, right? So, in the sense of the students, right, in school age children that we're working with, some of these maladaptive behaviors, a lot of times staff maybe get caught up on taking them personally. Like, oh, this kid's just giving me a hard time today. Or, oh, this kid's a bad kid. He's, and you hear it often in teachers' lounges, during the start of the next school year, like, oh, you got so-and-so. Oh, you have that student. Oh, good luck, right? That kid's a handful, and just kind of starting off on a bad note for that student, from the get-go. You're setting that student up to already have this label with a new teacher that they're going to be a handful. So just really making sure that we're meeting kids where they are, right? And that, I mean, let's just say, for example, with like the ABCs of behavior, what I always tell my staff, is the behavior, right, is the communication. So the antecedent, I mean, I think we all know these, the ABCs, right? The antecedent is the desire, let's say, for attention, right? The behavior is a way in which the individual is communicating that they want that attention, or the way they go about trying to gain that attention. And the consequence is where we come in, right? So the consequence is we either fulfill the need by reinforcing with providing the attention, or if the way that the behavior or the attention was being attempted to be gained is not the way we would like it, then we reshape, right? We redirect, we provide a new tool for that student to achieve the same goal. And then we begin reinforcing that new communication. So, hey, you want attention, I see that. Next time you want attention, try requesting it this way, right? And then reinforcing as a student attempts those things. So first and foremost, right, acknowledging the need, right? We hear you and we see that you want the attention. So we're not going to withhold that we hear your communication. We just want you to use a different way of communicating. Maybe don't, use some of the behaviors that you're using, and hey, we're going to reinforce that with giving you the attention that you need, as opposed to waiting until it turns into what we, some in the field might call maladaptive behavior. And then now we're starting to, have to readdress the whole thing from a whole different perspective because we've let it go on for too far. So just really making sure that we're listening to kids and their behaviors, because ultimately that's all they're trying to do. They're trying to communicate to us that they have a need that's not being met. And it's our job to try to figure out what that need is, and giving them a way to communicate when they need that, and finding a way for us to provide that through reinforcement. So obviously, behavior, right? It's something that a lot of people have difficulty, talking about, just communications in general. Use of the word discipline. Some people see discipline as a bad word, right? Others say, well, no, the word discipline is really more of an educational word, and it just got this bad rep, through time. Discipline started being seen as something that's bad. Well, I'm going to discipline you, but in reality, no, it was a teaching opportunity. Let me give you a discipline on the way you should communicate that you want attention, right? So all of our approaches when it comes to discipline, and we do try to steer away from that wording with Woodcraft Rangers, so we're very restorative in our approach to behavior. Rather than tell you what you did wrong, we would prefer to tell you what we would like you to do, and what we would like you to see, what we would like to see more of out of you, and reinforcing those things. So really strengths-based. If we know that an individual is really good at, let's say, showing empathy toward others, then maybe we place them in a position where they're able to practice that skill and get recognized for it. So really just finding a way for individuals to fit into our program, as they are, as opposed to us really changing our program to fit them. We're going to find places in our program for them to shine with the skills that they do have. And that, this kind of comes from adapting curriculum, right? We are an after-school program, so we do have enrichment programs, and some of them might not be interesting to some of these students, and some of them might be, right? We have our sports, we have our STEM, we have music, we have mariachi, folklorico, skateboarding. So, and like I said, we hold very true to that promise that if a student says they're not interested in any of those programs, we're definitely going to try to go out in the community and hire a staff member to provide a program on something that student is interested in. That is something that we hold ourselves to. So, aside from that, right, just inclusive socialization. What we really want to focus on, because I think the focus is really heavily on the kiddos we serve, but we also need to focus on the other students in the environment. We need to make sure that those students are also, being taught ways to approach our kiddos, and just, gaining a deeper understanding of what it's like to interact with these kiddos, and that there's no reason to be scared. They're not different. They're still kids, and they still enjoy the same things that you do. And like I mentioned earlier in my segment, by doing so, I think that we're just going to create an awesome society where our youngsters going forward are just going to have this deeper understanding of individuals with developmental disabilities and intellectual disability, and just be able to understand, as far as society is concerned, what changes we can make, to eliminate societal barriers, and just make sure everyone's included, right? Now, culturally, I mentioned earlier, we really do need to focus on, training on cultural competencies and sensitivities, and understanding how cultural factors intersect with ID/DD. Some cultures might be more readily, able to be convinced to look into various services for their kiddo, where other cultures just might not. They're not as open about discussing some of these things. So just really making sure, based on the region that we're in, we're mindful of those differences, and we're able to approach those differences in a way that's, respectful, of those differences, and acknowledging them, but also making sure that we're doing the best that we can to educate those individuals on why we're using the approach that we're using, or why we feel that these resources might be of help to them. So and right, of course, having those conversations in a very respectful way, and respecting that if the family decides at the end of the day that they don't want that resource, that's perfectly fine. That's their choice to make. All we can do is present it to them and hope that it gets utilized, right? And then obviously that takes me back to family engagement, so just really making sure that there's an open communication with families. We want to make sure, if with our after school programs, if there was, and I tell my staff, right, we don't want to ever only talk to families when there's bad news to share, because right away, that's the parent. If the parent sees a certain staff standing out there waiting for, for them to come pick up their kiddo, they're right away going to have this negative mindset of like, oh, what did they do, right? So making it a point to not only highlight and talk to the parent when there's bad news, right, which is important. We do need to have those conversations, but also highlighting the positive things that kiddo might have done that day. And if it was a perfect day and there were no behaviors or anything like that to report that, because parents, as much as they love to hear the bad things about their kids, I can guarantee you they definitely enjoy hearing the good things a lot more. And you're also going to just boost the self-esteem of that individual, that kiddo, right? They're going to say, hey, like, maybe that parent's going to take them for a little treat because of what they did, So just making sure that we also take the time to acknowledge the good in the kids, like I mentioned, we have this belief in our company, that all children are innately good. That's something that we hold true to, is that we have this belief that all children are innately good, but also I add to that and say, but kids are also not perfect, and neither are we. So as innately good as I'm sure all of us here believe that we are, and I'm sure that we have our bad days, and it's okay to have that bad day. If you get cut off on the freeway one time, maybe you let it go and you're okay, right? But if you get cut off 10 times in a row within, a 5-mile drive, you might get a little upset, right? And you might have a bad day, and you might get to work and just maybe be a little irritable and just need some time to kind of, shake that off and get back into your mindset. But that's for us adults that have those coping mechanisms and coping skills. For some of these kiddos, something like that can really affect their entire day, and they might not be able to reset until the next day. So us making sure that we're being mindful of the fact that, yeah, all kids are innately good, right? But also kids are not perfect, and neither are we, and we shouldn't hold them to that standard, So just really making sure, again, right? Behavior is a communication, understanding that everyone has good days and bad days, and meeting the student where they are in that particular day. If the kid wants to lay down and take a nap, as long as they're in a safe space with positive influence, I am perfectly fine with that, because hey, maybe in an hour or two they'll get up and they'll want to participate in whatever the program is, but we need to, again, give them that opportunity to communicate their feelings, their needs, their wants, and then make sure that not only are we hearing them, but that we're actually reinforcing that by providing them with what it was that they communicated to us. So I'm not sure how I'm doing on time, but again, just wanted to say thank you, and once again, just leave you with, just really trying to focus on the behaviors going forward, at your sites or wherever it is that you're working with your kiddos, and just really take that concept of behavior as a communication, and just remembering that these kids are not acting up because they're bad kids. They're just trying to communicate some need that they're not getting from their environment, and it's our job to try to figure out how to reshape that communication and how to fulfill that need.
So many gems, and yeah, just really considering, that behavior as communication. We think about that all the time. If right, we're short-circuiting on the inside, but we can do that in the moment translation to say, I'm seeing that you want to be seen and loved. I'm seeing that, right, like you might be hurting, that if I can sort of translate into that's what the behavior is communicating to me, right, then I can translate that on the inside. I can respond with love. One of the things you talked about was the importance to engage families. And we thought that'd be really important, right, to surface the voice of families in this space. So I want to turn to you, Jen. And I just wonder if you might offer your perspective with all that you shared in terms of the context as a parent, as a member of a local advisory group, and taking some leadership in that regard. What do you think it's important for all of us to know?
Thanks, Jeff, and thanks to the panelists. I mean, everything that everyone has said is, definitely key for families as well. We want our children to have that sense of belonging, that connection, right? And that human approach, taking my child as he is into this space, and just, being able to provide that support and that collaboration, and creativity sometimes. Robert, what you just talked about, I call the snowball effect. Something that happened earlier in the day can like snowball and get bigger, as the day goes along. And that's some of the challenges I know my own son had, with different pieces. And something that happened at 9 o'clock that morning may have affected him in after school. And that, also that a lot of you connected to Expanded Learning are the constant person that they see every day. They get a new teacher every year, right? Most do. Most don't have the same teacher, but they have the same site coordinator, same Expanded Learning staff, but no matter what grade. So you are a constant. So being there, being with them, providing that connection, for families, it can be difficult, especially families of students with disabilities, because there are medical pieces that come into play, medical appointments and therapies and physical therapies. And there's also, there's just a lot of things that families are navigating, and that all, a lot of families feel grief or they feel isolated. So feeling that connection, feeling like you have a support system is critical, like feeling we're all on the same page, communication, because even things at home can affect, school and Expanded Learning. And so just continuing those ongoing connections, relationships are foundational, getting creative, being collaborative, these are all keys. And then also supporting other families as well. I know with my role, why I got into the kind of the leadership role was I know a good amount of, education and acronyms. Even when I first started going through some of the IEP, individualized education program plans, I was like, oh, this is new to me. I can't imagine a family who can't, speak English, language, navigating this. So for me, it was important to help other families in that role. And so utilizing existing resources through, districts and organizations such as, the SELPA, Special Education Local Plan areas as a resource, utilizing other connections such as the English Learner Advisory Committee, EWAC. There are a lot of different resources and structures in place for families. So connecting with them, communicating with them, sharing with them information about Expanded Learning, or, just saying, hey, we're here as a resource too to support your youth is critical. So all that information sharing, and just, appreciating, a child as a human in this work, that they bring in their skills, their, who they are into the space, and acknowledging them. I mean, that's the biggest piece we can lead with, right? Being able to give them an opportunity to expand their horizons, and just to make it student-centered. That's the key here. And how can we make it happen? So that, I hope, that gives you a little sense into the kind of the family connection to that. I know that many of you have family members or, peers or friends too, that just remember that this is human, and bringing everyone into the space, whoever they are. That's what matters. So, and thank you to the panel today. Appreciate it.
We are humans first. Folks, please do join me in thanking our panel in the chat. Panelists, I do hope that you have had a chance to peruse the chat. So much love for y'all, for all the wisdom that you've shared with us today. And we're going to wrap our panel there, and we're going to begin to transition into our regional breakout discussions. And so we'll turn it back, I believe, to Melissa to share with us what's happening with regional breakouts.
Thank you, Jeff, and thank you to our wonderful panelists. What an amazing day two. I know we will be sharing resources on our website and